Hello, thank you for joining us today at JALT International 2020. Please welcome Alexandra Burke, a public system educator and neurodiversity advocate, and her co-presenter, Jennifer from Soka University. They will be presenting Classroom Challenges, Your Hard to Reach Students. You both have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for joining us today. Jennifer?
Hi, everybody. Thank you again for coming. And Alex is going to speak at first for about 10 minutes, and she's going to lead you through a simulation. After that, we're going to get into some breakout rooms to share our ideas of how we felt about the simulation. Following that, I will make a short presentation and give you a simulation, followed by breakout rooms again. And at the end of the presentation, we'll have a discussion about best practice and some time left over for Q&A.
Okay, so now let's start here and just get my slideshow up. Okay, and I'll just share my screen. Okay, so what we're talking about is neurodiversity, and depending on where you are in the world, some of these things on the screen, dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, may be called specific learning differences, or they might have different names, or you might be able to get support for them. But I'll just go through them very briefly. So dyslexia is related to the ability to read and ability to produce sounds and to recognize sounds and pull meaning from what you're reading. It's nothing to do with your intellectual capacity. It's people with dyslexia are normal to high to low intelligence. They're everywhere basically, but it simply is part of how your brain processes information that it sees. There's argument about whether or not it's visual, but what is believed is it's what's going on at the part of your brain that processes visual information. Dysgraphia relates to handwriting, and that's something that I've personally struggled with all of my life. And ADHD is the issue of concentration. It is real, it's definitely real, and it affects your ability to cope with multiple situations at one time, although it's also very good at sort of hyper-focusing in on things. So I'm just going to give you some visuals on what these things look like, and I also have some guest quotes from people within our community who have some of these neurodiversities and would like to talk about what it's like for them. So I'm going to switch my screen share now just to, I'm just going to go to a different, I'm going to shift to a different thing I played. Well, that's not working. I'm just going to switch.
Alex, it says it started sharing.
Has it? Yeah, I'm just about to. It doesn't. It's not recognizing this computer. That's annoying. Okay, look, I'm just going to undo that for a moment. Okay, I know why that's going on. All right, I will now switch to. I'll just switch to ADHD for the moment. Now, for this part of the presentation, what I would like you to do is I would like you to talk. I'd like all of you to turn on your microphones, and if you want to tap on your table, if you want to do something like that, you are absolutely encouraged to do this. So can everybody please open your microphones right now? Anybody watching, please open your microphones, and I want you to do things like this, or I want you to scratch something or do something or drop something, okay? So if I can't hear much noise, that people unblock your mics, start making some noise. I can't hear much noise, a bit louder, so unmute your mics. Okay, somebody's, okay, here we go now. All right, yep, that's a couple of sounds. Good, more noise, please, more noise, thanks. Thanks very much, more noise, and all right, and let's put, I need people to start talking.
Okay.
I want you to start talking.
Right now.
Okay, and there we go. And right.
Yeah, I can hear you,
Hey,
Cindy.
I want you to look at have a look at the teacher. Look at the teacher's face, the little spot in the middle. Keep talking. Come on, make a record. You can keep going. I want you to focus. Can you just focus, please? Just focus. Focus. Okay, and now stop.
All right.
Stop. This is what treated ADHD looks like. Treated ADHD is the best option for avoiding long-term emotional disturbances. People with ADHD have 66% of people with ADHD have at least one neurodiversity plus ADHD. They are extremely likely to have anxiety. They're extremely likely to have depression, and it goes with drinking a lot of alcohol when you're an adult. But when you're a kid, you don't have that option. So it usually turns into something like, it goes two ways. Children with ADHD either become very withdrawn and they want to stop going to school, or they might also go into the direction of, they might go towards oppositional defiant disorder. And there's about 15 to 50% of people who have ADHD go into that pattern. I think somebody else is talking.
I'm sorry, can we mute?
Yeah, can somebody mute now at the moment? So, yeah. Okay, can somebody, can you, as the host, can you just mute them? Because we probably don't need that conversation here. Just spot the person.
Oh,
mute them.
no, that's not much added to it, is it? No, that looks a little bit nicer.
I can't find the.
Oh,
okay, who is it? Somebody.
I am sorry, I've got a friend who's presenting, so I've had to join their session on my tablet at the same time.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so oppositional.
So if you hear voices in the background, it's Alex and Jennifer presenting on.
Okay, I know who that is.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Carolyn, can you turn off your mic? Carolyn.
There it is. I got it. Sorry.
Okay,
sorry.
great. Okay, so people with oppositional defiant disorder, they're extremely hard to help because they have a sense of doing the wrong thing. And the reason they have a sense of doing the wrong thing is that with ADHD, Dr. Jelinek from the US did a study, and he found that children from the age elementary school year 1 to elementary school year 6 were likely to be scolded by teachers 20,000 times. So just think how your sense of well-being would be if you were scolded 20,000 times over 6 years, and that's just while you're at school in the classroom. Doesn't include what's happening outside of the rest of your life. And yeah, it's pretty pretty hard to deal with. Now let's go on. So we've had the okay. And this is what happens when you say, oh, well, they can focus when they want to. That's because what they're doing is really, really, really interesting. But the ability to hear a teacher is just not there. Treated ADHD, which will be unpopular with some people because some people are uncomfortable with the idea of this being something that requires medication. There is gold standard evidence from which you can see on Dr. John Ratey's site, which talks about combined physical activity and medication to enable the ability to stop and think before opening the mouth, before jumping off that fence, before sticking your hand up. It's really quite important, and it is transformational in the educational setting. So if this were diabetes, would you tell somebody not to take medicine for diabetes? Would you tell them not to take insulin? Would you tell a person with asthma not to take a bronchodilator if they're having an asthma attack? Come on, you can just, control yourself. You can just wake up to yourself. It's just not real. And the decision to use medicine is quite personal, but I do read a lot of chat boards, and the chat boards are littered with people who say, I never knew I had this. And quite often people are resistant to going for diagnosis of any kind. And I hear from teachers and from on the boards that basically about 1 in 9 people would get help. The rest of them don't get help. So I just want you to think about this in terms of ADHD, and think about that for the next time you have that kid that's yelling out in class or is doing something uncomfortable. Okay, now I'd like to move on now to, this is one of the quotes. This is one of our guest quotes. And it's a good friend of mine. And to this day, I have never seen their handwriting. Oh, pardon, there's a word that should have been blocked out there. Filter that with your minds, please, people. And here's another one. So in our presentation, we're trying to get across the feeling that you don't always know what's going on inside somebody else's mind or what they're seeing. And I'm just going to stop that share and switch to another share, just a moment. And sorry, I've just got another document to open up here. Okay, here's another one, and let's see, share this one here. Okay, get the screen share. I might be going over time here. You might have to poke me, Jennifer, if I'm going over time. Here we go. Okay.
Yeah, about another minute.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, one moment. Okay, all right. And now I think at that point it's time to go to breakouts. Okay.
All right, so we have 20 participants. How would you like the breakout rooms?
Maybe 4 people.
Okay.
Yeah, and for the breakout room, we just wanted you to react to the simulation or to some of the things that Alex has said. How can you connect that to what you're seeing in your practice? I think those might be some useful avenues to look down.
Great. And Alex, how long would you like the breakout rooms to be?
Jennifer, what was our timing on that?
Yeah, 5 minutes.
About 5 minutes. And within your group, just think of the key points that your group would like to feed back to the group.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you had some productive conversations in the breakout room. I'm going to make a short presentation now with a guided visualization as a stimulation. as a simulation so that you can kind of feel a little bit what it might be like a day in the life of an autistic student. So I'm just gonna share my screen. And yeah, you know, when we think about hard to reach students, I'm sure that we all have a couple of people that come to mind. And our problem with reaching them, I think, is more because we don't really know what exactly is going on with them. If we have a special needs student who is blind or deaf, the issue is quite clear. But if we have students with behavioral issues, we don't really know what's the cause. So it becomes much more difficult to approach them, it becomes much more difficult to reach them. And hopefully, through this presentation, talking about the different types of neurodiversity will help give you some kind of ideas of what your students experience and why. So I'm going to speak a little bit in particular about autism, which probably, as many people know nowadays, it's a genetically based neurobiological disorder. And really, what's happening with students on the autism spectrum at first, like when they're young, probably in preschool, you can notice large gaps in their language acquisition or an uneven pattern in language acquisition. Some students might speak very well, but they are not using socially appropriate language. Their pragmatics is off. Or you have students that seem to have great difficulty processing oral input, so they can't really have any output. So language is one of the key issues, and social interaction is also another. Our hard to reach students are students that you know, we don't understand what's going on with them. If we have a student that's blind or a student that's deaf, we know automatically what the issue is. We might not know how to handle it, but there's no stigma there and there's no embarrassment there. We have hard to reach students. Usually what we qualify them as are students whose behavior is so different than what we expect. And we tend to sort of shy away from them, or we don't know how to talk with them about these issues, not only because there's a stigma, but also because we don't know the root. So when we look at neurodiversity, as you know, Alex introduced, right, there's a lot of different aspects to it. One of the key aspects, though, is autism. Autism is one of the neurodiversity, like under the neurodiversity umbrella, where you know, the behavior is markedly different than other people, and it's much harder to mask, say, than dyslexia or ADHD. And most people nowadays know that autism is a genetically based and neurobiological disorder, and people don't grow out of it. They do learn probably in adulthood how to mask it a little bit better. So you might see students, especially female students, who have more social pressures, mask it a bit better. But as you know, with younger students, language and social interaction is a problem. Language is usually quite difficult to acquire. And in terms of social interaction, you can notice that students don't understand jokes. They don't understand how to make eye contact or share joint attention, different issues like that. And there's also sensory processing and perception. That's a key problem in autism, where you can't focus because there's too much noise or it's too loud. It's a little bit of an overlap with ADHD. Okay, and then yeah, I wanted to talk about Kanner and Asperger, because a lot of people say that neurodiversity is quite new. When I was young, we didn't have people with ADHD. Why are there so many new cases? Why does it seem that there's an explosion of students with autism? What's going on? Well, it's interesting because actually that's not the case. These two men are both responsible for diagnosing autism originally in 1940s. And the one on the left side of the screen, Leo Kanner, had it in his interest. He was working in the United States, and he was really interested in focusing on cases that are nowadays called classical autism, where people couldn't speak, or if they spoke, it was markedly different. People who is spun around or like spinning or shining objects and things like that. And he said that in his career, he only ever actually saw about 8 cases that he would say are autism. On the other hand, Hans Asperger worked in Europe, and he noticed that autism is actually a spectrum. It's not just classical autistic cases. And he estimated that approximately 1 in 30 students in a class would be on the spectrum. So there hasn't really been an explosion. It's just that we know a little bit more now about how it's a spectrum. And we did know that in the 1940s, but because Leo Kanner was publishing in English, that became the main narrative. And it wasn't until much later when Asperger's work was translated from German into English that we actually got to find out some of this information. The presentation of autism that you might see in the class is varied, and it really depends on age. There are different demands in a context, right? So if you have a kind of competitive classroom where students feel nervous and they have to perform in front of others, you might see the presentation of autism a lot stronger. If you have a quieter, more cooperative classroom that's, you know, what we would call nowadays more inclusive, you might not see the presentation of autism so strongly in any student, or the presentation of ADHD, simply because it's a more cooperative, quieter, sort of more easygoing classroom. Now, in terms of sensory processing and repetitive behaviors, those are some of the things that you might want to think about, because in autism, people process sensory information differently. It's a lot harder for them to understand what's being said, just for oral processing. And in response to having difficulty with language and social communication and processing what they see and hear, they want to go into a world that's more stable for them. So they have these repetitive behaviors and routines where they can kind of have some control over what's happening. And because of language and sensory processing, it also leads to learning challenges, right? You can imagine if it's difficult for you to filter out everything that's going on, and if you're not really sure what's being said and you don't have visual schedules, learning challenges will occur. I just want to go through a guided visualization activity for a moment, which this is something that I put together with several autistic students that I've had at my current university. And I asked them, what do you feel on a daily basis? What is this like for you to come to school? And I would like for you to please listen and try to imagine yourself in this type of situation. So I wake up really early in the morning, and I feel frantic even though it's very early. I rush to pack my bag, but it takes forever because I can never remember what I need. I look for my schedule and it's confusing. I can't remember what the homework was. What books do I need for today? What materials do I need to take in my backpack? How should I pack my lunch? When? What should I eat? It's hard for me to get dressed. I have to think about so many things. Time and weather and what other people might think of me. It's a very confusing process. When I enter the classroom, I have an attendance card that I need to beep. And when I beep it, other students start laughing, and I realize that I'm in the wrong room. I can't remember where I'm supposed to be. As I leave the class, I hear somebody whispering, "You're a freak." When I finally get to the right class, I'm a bit late. And the teacher warns me that 3 lates equals an absence. It's hard for me to know where to sit. I know most people don't like me, but I can't understand why. When I finally get settled, I don't know where to look. The fluorescent lights are so bright. There's noise coming from the window. My friend has her phone next to me, and I can see the light of the phone. There's a computer screen at the front of the class, but there's also the whiteboard. I don't know where to direct my attention, but by now we're already doing group work and I don't know what we're supposed to do. What should I pay attention to? What should I say? I notice that other students are exchanging glances and smiling, but I don't know why. My teacher comes and tries to help. She says that my books are disorganized and I didn't bring my homework from the last class. This to me is such a strike in the face. It takes me about 10 minutes to process that I've been chastised by my teacher. And by that time, the group work is over and I haven't participated. Things go on like this through my day, but at lunch, I have a wonderful time. I sit outside by myself and I have some small stones in my bag. I take out these stones and I take out a Sharpie and I draw on these stones and I'm lost in this world of the stones. I draw and at the end I look at the stone and I've created a beautiful piece of art. This is the highlight of my day and how I can relax. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. So since this is more of a workshop, we did want to try to include your voices, and we wondered if there's something that you would like to share after having been through those two types of simulations. Or was there anything that was particularly interesting for you, or that you felt it was important for you to know? Does anybody want to share?
Hi. If it's okay to share about the first group, actually, we thought we were going to report back as a group. So I said I would say what we talked about. One of our participants has been dealing with some medical issues, and it really made her feel rather sick. In fact, when all of that noise was happening simultaneously, and it made her feel some empathy for people who are in those situations. But at her university, they have been, teachers have been focused on trying to provide better support for students who are neurodiverse. Another participant said that when it was all happening, he felt like he couldn't even look at the screen, like he found himself kind of looking around. And he wonders what that's like then now that so many schools are online, how students are coping. I was so focused on making noise that I didn't have a reaction to that. But I felt incredibly annoyed when suddenly there was noise coming in when Alex was talking. Not that that was anybody's fault, of course, but I wondered, oh my gosh, do people feel annoyed? Do people with ADHD always feel annoyed? And then do they then mistakenly maybe project that feeling of everybody's annoyed, with maybe them even, or just how that works for them psychologically. And also that I feel like there may be students who are neurodiverse, but I don't know what to do exactly, because I don't want to go up to a student and be like, so by the way, I think you might be neurodiverse. And there isn't somewhere I can send them on campus either, if I think there is a neurodiversity issue. And so that's something that I struggle with. So that's what we talked about.
Thank you so much for saying that. There's a lot of different things to discuss there, particularly with the stigma, right? Particularly with dealing with stigma and also getting support, right? We feel like we're alone and we should actually be working in teams to support students. Is there anybody else who wanted to add to anything that Catherine said, or what did you talk about with your group? Anybody want to share?
Could I say that in the first group that I wanted to introduce Chiho because she told us that she has dyslexia, but she didn't know for a very long time. And she's a teacher, but she now teaches kids with dyslexia. So I just wanted her to, you know, I said, actually, I said, I'm going to demand more time because we really wanted to hear more from her, but maybe Chiho, you could just say a few words if you don't mind.
So what I said was I am maybe slightly dyslexic, but I've never diagnosed. And especially when I was in university, I struggled the most because I had to learn academic English, which is quite difficult, tough. And so I am teaching in like a city running learning center after school program for high school students. And it's inside the high school. So I work with high school teachers, and this is my 3rd year. And the last 2 years, I kept talking to my colleague, high school teachers, that many of them have some learning differences, but they kept ignoring and said that there is nothing they can do. But this year, I could talk to principal of the high school, and finally they started to work with me to help students with learning differences and ADHDs, because many of students, particularly in this rural area, I live in Shimane, a tiny village in Shimane, students cannot see a doctor to be examined. So it's a very tough situation here. And I realized that keep fighting is very important because I could make a change throughout the year. That's what I said. So thank you for listening.
Yeah. Thank you, Donna and Chiho, for first of all, to Donna for suggesting and for Chiho for speaking out, because we really do need to hear voices from people that have this experience themselves, right? And there is a long way to go. And if we don't insist, like Catherine was saying, you know, I don't have a place to send my students to for support. If we don't advocate for that, it's not going to happen, right? And that's the thing, like we need, I know from my own work experience that we talk a lot about problems with students, but when it comes to actually trying to get them to go to the places that can help them, there's coordination issues and privacy issues, and there's so much to overcome. And you need to make pathways towards solutions. Yeah. Okay, I think it's time to move on. We wanted to talk a little bit about best practice. Alex, do you want to say a few?
I'll just unmute myself. Okay. I've got an echo here. The Ministry for Education has just released some guidelines, and I'll put a copy of them in the chat. And please take a copy of them. Can you hear me now? You can? Okay, good. That's much better. Thank you for fixing the echo problem. So I had to switch devices. Yeah, so the ministry has put a set of guidelines out, and in those guidelines there are a whole lot of videos from different organisations. There is also you can see a diagram of what dyslexia looks like. Which is really, really helpful. I've been waiting to see these for a very, very long time. There's lots of interesting software and tools like pens that will read text off the page. There's examples of different kinds of software you can use, note-taking systems, but it's really important to see that this issue has been addressed. And one of the encouraging things that's happening in Japan at the moment is the GIGA school plan, which is to roll out tablets and iPads across the country for everybody from elementary school right up all the way through, and there'll be one child, one device. And for the students with neurodiversity, a lot of them have issues of difficulty with reading, and the best option for them is to actually have access to audiobooks audio versions of textbooks and have access to something that will tell them what's, will tell them more about the picture they're looking at. And this is being rolled out in other countries. What typically happens is if you get a diagnosis, quite often the Board of Education won't have the money to supply you with the things that you need. And what I'd also like you to know is that the Made by Dyslexia Association Foundation in the UK has done sort of studies, and they found that only about 3% of teachers have been trained in dyslexia, and this is globally. So only about 3% of teachers actually know what it is. So there is free study, a free online training course available for dyslexia. And I'll put a copy of that, those slides for that in the chat. And about 80% of the people who have dyslexia are estimated never to get diagnosed during their lifetime, or during their school period. And we'd like to change that, because the more we normalise it, the more the less stigma there is. Now we've got the last 10 minutes. I wanted to see if there were any other voices that we, do you want to go straight into your tips now, Jennifer? Because those tips, and I encourage people to take a photograph of them if you want to, take a picture of it.
You know what? Yeah. I can actually, share the presentation afterwards, but I think because we only have 10 minutes left,
yep.
I wanted to focus on some highlights. And the way that I chose these tips, like we, in previous presentations that both Alex and I have done on this, we focus on the so-called expert tips and the research that's been done. And what I did instead for this presentation is to ask my students, and ask also people that are, in organizations that I'm involved with that help autistic people, or autistic advocacy organizations. What are your tips for teachers? So these are tips from autistic people, what they want to see in the classroom rather than what the experts say is needed in the classroom. And, I have a whole list of them, but I want to hit the highlights now, because I also think we need some extra time for Q&A at the end.
Yep.
But the first one is, let me opt out of group work. So, we do a lot of communicative language teaching in Japan, and we're assuming that everybody's up for that most of the time. And I think that in order to really be an inclusive environment and to accommodate people, we do have to have alternative activities for people to do when they just don't feel they can contribute to group work, if it's too stressful or too noisy or whatever, to allow them to opt out of that without being penalized. I think that's one of the key things that they'd like to ask for. And in the past, I've used a card system where, a yellow card means I'm feeling anxious and stressed, and a red card means I need to stop. And at first I thought students wouldn't want to use this because they feel embarrassed, but actually they did want to use it. And other students who don't have diagnoses also wanted to use it. And people sometimes ask, like, don't they abuse that system? And they don't. I haven't seen that yet. I don't know, maybe it's because I work in a university setting, but people have not abused that privilege to opt out. The second thing is, let me adjust my assignments. So we have a lot of cookie cutter assignments for students. And, if I think about my own context, a lot of people are, like, my students are writing research papers, and we have fairly rigid, or I have fairly rigid topics for these. Let people work within their own interest area. This is very important, I think, for neurodiverse people who tend to have very strong special interests, right? Let them work in their own interest area. Number 3 is give more time. Give more time if necessary. So we have due dates on a lot of things. How about, having several due dates through the semester that are negotiated with the student according to their schedule and what they think they can get done? Might be a more practical way, instead of just having, set a due date in the middle of the semester, at the end of the semester, and nothing sort of in between. So to kind of scaffold that. And finally, to use the whiteboard a lot, or to use PowerPoint a lot. So there's some kind of visual support. When you're giving instructions, have a bullet list. You have to do this, this, this in group work, because otherwise the teacher's voice and the talking gets all mixed up with everything else. If you have a visual schedule, that can be very helpful for neurodiverse students. These are the number one, the top things that they had asked for. So, you know, we have about 7 or 8 minutes left. So we wanted to offer time for Q&A, or anybody that wants to share experiences working with neurodiverse students or special needs students.
And if people would like, they can unmute their mic and ask a question, or they could type it in the chat box. If they just type it and they don't want to speak, that's fine.
Yeah. I just wondered, has anybody ever been in a classroom where you've seen, or been at, in a situation where, as a child, the person next to you is being told to focus and try harder? If you've been in that situation, you can put your hand up, or. Yep. Okay. And what I'm hoping is that you'll get the feeling now that this is something that it definitely wasn't intentional. It was out of control of that student. And the people who control the environment are us as teachers. And we are all teaching neurodiverse students right now. We might not be aware of it. We may not see ourselves as special needs teachers, but reality is we all are. So yeah, and so we've got 6 minutes.
I have a question. I've since we were online this semester, I've had normally in the classroom I give quizzes right in the classroom, and like it's a combination of listening and vocabulary and things. So I've been using Google Forms and Microsoft Forms, and I give them almost a week to finish it. But some students still don't finish it. And I'm wondering, am I doing something wrong, or should I set a strict deadline? Generally, I want them to finish it, and then after the deadline, they get the results back, like with the correct answer, so they can review. But if some students haven't done it yet, then I can't do it. So I'm just wondering what you would recommend.
Are you doing? You're using Google Forms or something?
Google Forms
so you're using a document system. Would you? Are you doing any Zoom at any time, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do have classes on Zoom.
Okay. Yeah. So when you're setting assignments, when you've given the assignment to the students and you've said, this is what I want done, get the students to go into breakout rooms and to confirm with each other what they think you want done and when you want it done and how much you want done. And then get them to come, and when they come back from the breakout room, just get them to say, okay, what are we doing? When are we doing it by? Who do we ask if we have a problem? And you could also get them to write a timeline on the board, very, very simple sort of line with today on it, and then sort of some other points about these are my goals for steps for breaking it down. That's not always going to be possible for people with ADHD and people with dyscalculia, because they have a lot of trouble measuring time. And yeah, so, but that would be something I would recommend in that situation. Get the students to solve it.
Okay, thank you.
Just looking in the chat.
Yeah, so CD has a couple of questions, and Jen Teeter, really good questions.
Yep.
So CD is asking, how do we initiate conversation with a neurodiverse student? Yeah, well, this is something that always comes up, it seems, in these types of presentations. And there's no easy way, but what I'm trying to do at the beginning of every class, I have what's called an intake form, where I ask a variety of questions to the students, mostly about if they've ever studied abroad before, what they feel their English level is, what their experiences have been doing reading and writing in English, because mostly it's academic purposes, English for academic purposes kind of classes. But at the end of the form, I always ask, do you have a diagnosis that you would like to share? I said, I have neurodiverse people in my family. That means that they have this, this, and this kind of diagnosis. So I'm familiar with this. If you'd like to share, I'll do anything that I can to help support you in the class. And when you frame it that way, that there's people in my family, I know people, I'm close with people, that have these things, and it's a safe, it's a safe space in my office where we can talk, they tend to tell me if they have a formal diagnosis or if they think that they should get a diagnosis. They usually do tell me, and we can negotiate a kind of support for them. Some of them don't want to go to the counseling center or to another kind of, we have like a kind of learning support center. They don't really necessarily want to go there, but they will negotiate with you what they feel they need in the class. I wish that more people would use those centers though, because it took a lot of advocacy, I think, to set them up. And there's still a stigma attached to it, which is very unfortunate. And I think the most important thing is to try to be as open as possible in class. Just like you wouldn't be able to hide somebody that's blind or deaf, we shouldn't hide our neurodiverse students, or they shouldn't be trying to hide the way that they work, because they do have so many positive things to add to the class. And hopefully we can try to make an environment in class where their positive points are highlighted all the time, so that it's not a stigma anymore.
Yep. I've put some things in the chat just now for fonts, etc. Now, I'm just going to add something else in. I think Jen Tita has asked a question. Could you address that, Jennifer?
I'm just reading it now because I was looking at the fonts. Maybe because CD was asking about fonts and.
Yep. Yeah, I've done the fonts. Yeah.
Okay.
Done the font issue.
So would you be able to provide?
Oh yeah. UD. Thanks very much, Chiho, for the UD Digital Curl Casual Ditai font, and that is available now. That's really, really useful font to download. Whatever you do, make sure you download and save this chat. And I'm just going to use my, we've actually at finish time. And if you go to my profile page, you can click on download poster. And on the right-hand side of that, you can see some my recommendations for what to do in the classroom to help students. So I know we are going to have to finish in a moment. I'll just copy and paste a link to that.
Okay, I just wanted to say to Jen, I don't know off the top of my head about Japanese, but I am connected with the Learning Support Center at my university and the Counseling Center, so I can ask them. And as for being diagnosed as gifted, I think it just goes according to your IQ scores, right? If you have over 130 or 150 or something like that. So there could.
How I was diagnosed, it was different, but yeah, go on.
No, it often does go by that, but I don't know, I'd be skeptical of somebody being called gifted and somebody not. I think the key lesson that I've learned from studying neurodiversity and working with neurodiverse people daily is that everyone has a gift. And that's exactly what we want to do with our students, is get them to bring out whatever gift that is. Our motto at the university is reach your potential. And people can't reach their potential unless they have the skills of recognizing what their gifts are and how they can use them. And I think, as Alex was saying, if you're told 20,000 times in your first 6 years of school that you're not doing well and you need to focus and pay attention, you basically have no real shot at finding what your potential is and reaching it. We have to start very early with students, praising them, being positive with them, and really seeing each student as bringing something to class, even if they can't do it in the standard way, I think. I don't know if that really speaks to what you're talking about as gifted, but.
I just, I have a slightly different view. I look at giftedness is, it can actually be something that's really hard, because, and often those kids don't know how to be quiet in a classroom, or they don't know how to interact successfully. So, and that's what happens when ADHD interferes with giftedness. So you can go from being a high performing student to being a low to middle range one. And those are the kids who are likely to be told that they're not trying. I think the most difficult words in the universe are, you're just not trying. And I think there's probably quite a few people who've heard those. I think we are, is there somebody in the room immediately now, Todd?
Yeah, so we're done for the time.
Okay,
but,
yep.
So why don't we close it with just a officially with some applause, but
Yes.
then we can leave the room open, and there's nothing going on for another 20 minutes, so the room will stay open. So can we all have everybody unmute one more time? And I'm sorry for all the audio problems. That was on my end, but can we all unmute and give a big round of applause both to Alexandra and Jennifer? Fantastic presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
And,
you.
yeah, and thank you for coming, and thank you for giving us your time. And yeah, coloured backgrounds. I'm definitely a fan of coloured backgrounds. And